Okay, so now we're wrapping up the Autobiography of Malcolm X. We have 2 sessions left this week and next week. And this week is going to be... Oh, Jazakallah, appreciate it. This week is going to sort of speak about his transformation. We spoke last time, before the 2-week break when I was out of town, about what happened, how Malcolm began to recognize really the significant nature of Elijah Muhammad's discretions, and in particular what he did to Malcolm after he knew Malcolm had found out. Because remember, Malcolm found out, Malcolm knew, but he hid it, and he made excuses for Elijah Muhammad over and over and over. But eventually what they do is they turn their back on Malcolm X, and we discussed that already. Malcolm, he was really caught in a difficult place, and there's a really important lesson to learn from what happens next. He's really thinking over what he should do, what he should do, and so he went to visit his sister Ella, and Ella is the one with whom he had moved in when he first moved to Boston, and then obviously the relationship strained when he went to prison, but she still did her best to maintain it. She would write to him, she would send him money. Then he joined the Nation of Islam, and she was in the Nation of Islam herself. And so they were happy that he had come around. Then he gained fame. And the fame was not what they wanted. They liked the fact that he lived a disciplined life. And then Ella actually, Ella actually left the nation. She was sort of removed from the Nation of Islam because of her staunch views on what was correct and what they were doing wrong, and they didn't like a vocal woman to speak. But Malcolm, he didn't defend his sister at that point. He stayed with the Nation of Islam. But the moment he began to have questions, Ella was there by his side. And so that first point I want to mention, standing by the ones whom you love, friends, family. You don't have to always justify their acts. When Malcolm was in prison, Ella could have just walked away and said, "You messed up. I put my neck out on the line for you to make sure that you became better. You didn't. You messed up. You're gone." But she didn't do that. Rather, she always, without supporting what he was doing that was wrong, she made sure that he knew that she was always by his side. And so now Malcolm, knowing that, comes to her, and he went to her and he sat down with her and said, "Ella, I want to make the pilgrimage to Mecca." Now, what's interesting as you learn is that Ella actually was saving money for the same reason. She had started school up and she was teaching and she was making good money, but she wanted to do the same thing. And at this point, when Malcolm says that, she doesn't say, "Oh, you know what, I was thinking the same thing," or, "Hey, can you hold off for a year? I was thinking about going, then you can come after me," or she didn't say any of that. The moment Malcolm says, "Ella, I want to make the pilgrimage to Mecca," Ella just said, "How much do you need?" And this was the support that she provided him. And that type of unflinching love and support is something that we miss today. And so I would highly recommend that whoever your family members are, whoever your friends are, sometimes you might have beef with them, sometimes there might be a break, but despite what happens, to always be there, because there's going to come a time where they're going to reach a crossroad and they need someone to speak to. And if you're not there to speak to, they'll speak to someone else. But they cannot expect the same amount of love or support or just good wishes. Like you guys who come every Sunday and play ball and have class. If I met a random guy in the street, Muslim brother, I would happily try to take care of him, but there's definitely a deeper relationship that we have than that person has. So would I try to give him time and advise him? Yes, I would. Can I guarantee to be the same thing I would give to you guys? No, because human nature dictates that you just happen to grow closer with certain people. And so Ella, right away, the way she responds. Now, Malcolm, when he goes for Hajj, there are going to be some issues. But these are some of the miracles that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed in the life of Malcolm X. Give me Hisham first. Yeah. He was thirsty. I'm good. Oh man, whatever. I won't be able to drink while I speak anyway. And plus, winning, it's its own quench. Anyway, Malcolm, he faced some obstacles. One, they had to prove that he was Muslim. And there's some amazing details that occur. I'm going to skip them about how he gets there because there's some lessons I want us to learn about what happens when he finally arrives. So Malcolm, when he applies for the visa to Saudi Arabia, the Saudi ambassador actually said that no converted Muslim can go unless they have the approval of this person named Dr. Mahmoud Shawarbi. And it's funny because Malcolm gets his number. Malcolm calls him, and when Malcolm calls him, he picks up, and he said, "Oh my God, I was just going to get in touch with you. Come over." It's not like they're best friends or anything. And so he comes over. He writes a letter approving it. He gives him a gift, which is a book, and then now Malcolm has that first key set. And the second thing, Dr. Shorby, he gives the number of his son, Omar Azzam, who lived in Jeddah. He said, call Muhammad Shorby, his son, and then his son's another friend, Omar Azzam. He said, call these two people. So Malcolm has these little connections that are now forming. Now Malcolm, it's funny. He gets he goes to the airport in Kennedy International Airport. He takes off on the flight, and when he got on the flight, two people sitting next to him. He introduced himself, and they happened to be Muslim, and they were going to Cairo, and then he gets to Frankfurt, and then they began to talk. And a few hours layover, they began to sort of walk around Frankfurt, and it's interesting because when he was there, the first person he meets is this white American student from Rhode Island who comes and looks over and says, "Are you X?" And he said he laughed. And then he said, "I never heard it that way, but yeah, that's me." He said, "You can't be. No one believed me that I saw you." And so Malcolm, one by one, there were signs of acceptance on this trip that he was going to go on. Anyway, now Malcolm makes it to Saudi. I want to sort of begin to skip ahead to some of the things that actually happened over there. It's funny. When Malcolm, he says, entering the state of Ihram, we took off our clothes and put on two white towels, one the izar folded around the waist, the other the rida, which is thrown over the shoulders and the neck. And they wore simple sandals. And so now they begin to go and they're calling labbaik, 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 Allahumma labbaik. And as they're traveling, Malcolm begins to see something he's never seen before. Remember, in America, he's seen people who are white, obviously, in different colors, different shades, I should say. He's seen blacks, different shades. But he's never seen them together. So now Malcolm, he's chanting with all these individuals who do not look like him, who for all intensive purposes in America would have been considered his enemies. He's saying labbaik. They're all crying out that here we are, Allah for you. And now he comes and he's seated at Hajj and he begins to say that he saw people, and I'll quote some passages shortly, that he saw people that were of different skin color, they were of different shades, but they all had the same purpose and same intention. And then what he began to notice was that these individuals, though on the surface they looked like the quote-unquote white man. Let me explain the white man for a moment. So when I was in Zambia, so obviously I'm not white. I'm darker than I think all of you, or close to being darker than all of you. I mean, it's hard to tell shades sometimes, but I'm not white. There's nowhere I'm going to go where someone's going to call me white. Okay, and so in Zambia, I remember treating one of the security guards at a place where one of my friends lived. He's like, you're the nicest white man I've ever met. I'm like, treated, I'm not white. And I actually put my hand next to him. I'm like, I'm darker than you are. He was a native Zambian. I'm darker than you are. He started laughing. He's like, no, that's not what a white man is. And he explained, a white man's a concept. It doesn't necessarily mean a white man, which I always sort of thought it meant. It's a concept. It's someone with a certain level of affluence and privilege. Now, maybe that's not the case here in America, but at least globally, it seems to be the case. And so when he was saying that, you're the nicest white man I ever met, he basically was saying that you're a Westerner. I had more money than them, obviously. I shouldn't be obvious, but I did have more money than them, etc. So you're the nicest white man I ever met. Malcolm began to see that white was a shade. It wasn't a representation of what was inside. And he began to see that the blonde hair, blue eyes were just shades. It was just the same canvas that Allah Ta'ala quote unquote paints on, just uses different colors for his servants. And so now when he begins to see people eating and people drinking and people sharing the same meals, but having a positive disposition, good position, good a desire to be good towards one another, it blew him away. He says, I had reflected since that the letter I finally sat down to compose had been subconsciously shaping itself in my mind. The color blindness, of the Muslim world's religious society and the color blindness of the Muslim world's human society. These two influences had each day been making a greater impact and an increasing persuasion against my previous way of thinking. Simply put, what? I never was colorblind before until I met real Muslims. And this is really sad to hear. Not for him, but for us. Because Muslims, we are not colorblind. Like Coach Johnson, we were just talking today, he told me when he first came to this community, it was hard for him to infiltrate the community, to come in and be a part of the community. And he said, may Allah bless some of the brothers who took me in, but I had to sort of keep coming back. He's a former Nation of Islam, Black American, and he said it was hard for me to get in, but finally when I got in, they really accepted me. But sometimes we see a person and we begin to, not with him, but sometimes we pass judgment right away, just because the shade of skin or the language they're speaking, etc. But we don't know that person, what their purpose may be, their intention may be. You know, when Umar radiallahu anhu came to the Prophet to become Muslim, he didn't declare, I want to become Muslim. He came to the door. One of the Sahaba saw him outside the door and he just sat down. And Hamza radiallahu anhu said, why are you sitting? He said, not answer the door. He said, Umar is out there. So he said, well, let him in. He said, he has his sword. So let him in. If he's in for good, we can give him good. And if he's in with evil intention, we'll kill him with the sword that he brought with him. Hamza was tough. But the idea is that, you know, you can't make these predisposed conclusions or judgments about people. If we do, you know, when I was out of the country, I was in Turkey last week, I met some people, they didn't have long beards. They didn't have, they weren't wearing like a qamis or anything, but their love for Muslims and love for deen was apparent. You know, they'd go to a masjid. Can you imagine this in America? If outside of a masjid in America, if people stood with saying that you can't come in unless you're wearing a hijab or covering your legs, even for the men, if they're wearing shorts, like you have to cover your legs, they would give like this wrap for them to wear. How would Americans respond, American Muslims? This is my right. How can you do this to me? Don't you know? No matter how secular Turkey was, every individual I saw, and I sat watching for a little bit as well, who was asked to put it on, did not have any type of reaction that would have shown that they were upset. They simply put it on, they went in, and then they just went to look at the masjid, just sightseeing, and they stepped out and they put the garment where it was supposed to be. Even the Topkapi Palace where I happened to visit, where they had the relics, when you go to the entire they don't make you wear any of that. When you go where the sacred relics are, items that belong to the Prophet or the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, or that are attributed to other prophets, they make you put that on. And everyone put it on. No ifs, ands, or buts. They just sort of put it on. They recognize, I'm entering into a sacred place, I should be covered, etc. They didn't exude, at least superficially, you could not see that there was any superficial, quote-unquote, manifestation of the deen. But they had love in their hearts inside. And, Malcolm learned over here that it wasn't about the exterior. They were so busy judging about the exterior that sometimes they forgot about the interior. He mentions, never have I witnessed such sincere hospitality and the overwhelming spirit of true brotherhood, including sisterhood, as is practiced by people of all colors and races here in the ancient Holy Land, the home of Abraham, Muhammad, alayhi salatu wasalam, and all the other prophets of the Holy Scriptures. For the past week, I've been utterly speechless and spellbound by the graciousness I see displayed all around by people of all colors. I have been blessed to visit the holy city of Mecca. I have made my 7 circuits around the Kaaba, led by a mutawaf named Muhammad. I drank water from the well Zamzam. And then he continues. I want to just skip a little further. There were tens of thousands of pilgrims from all over the world. They were of all colors, from blue-eyed blondes to black-skinned Africans. But we were all participating in the same ritual, displaying a spirit of unity and brotherhood that my experiences in America had led me to believe never could exist between the white and the non-white. Then he says, America needs to understand Islam because this is the one religion that erases from its society the race problem, which is so sad to hear because we see racism within our Muslim community. But it shouldn't be there. Throughout my travels in the Muslim world, I have met, talked to, and often eaten with people who in America would have been considered white, quote unquote, but the white attitude was removed from their minds by the religion of Islam. I have never before seen sincere and true brotherhood practiced by all colors together, irrespective of their color. And finally, there's more, but I just want to mention one more thing over here. You may be shocked by these words coming from me, but on this pilgrimage, what I've seen and experienced has forced me to rearrange much of my thought patterns previously held and to toss aside some of my previous conclusions. This was not too difficult for me, etc., etc., etc. So Malcom is transformed. And that's another lesson that we hear. Hajj and Umrah is a transformative experience. But it's transformative those people who are going to seek a change. Let me explain what I mean by that. Have you ever met someone who goes for Hajj or Umrah? How was it? And they begin to complain about like the heat in the hotel, and then we had to wait in this line. Yeah, they went to the same place Malcom went. Well, what's the difference? Malcom did not go seeking a vacation. That's not what he was seeking. He was seeking clarity and connection. He was seeking to change himself. So when you seek something, Allah gives you that. وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى. And so for Malcom, what he was seeking was clarity amongst his confusion. Allah granted to him in such a way that the past decades have been erased from his mind now. All of those thoughts, the confusion that's sort of plaguing him, completely erased from him. And when we go for Hajj or Umrah, and when we go travel anywhere for that matter, we should go with that same intention. Because yes, a hotel might be nice, 7-star hotel, 5-star hotel, these towers and this, etc. But you can experience that anywhere. But when you go to a Muslim country, namely to Saudi, for the Mecca or for the Hajj to Mecca and Medina, for Umrah, etc., a person has to go recognizing all these things are not important. And they have to go with a purpose to seek and to find, and Allah will grant them what they seek. And that's what Malcom found. And, praying to the same God, he mentions, drinking from the same plate, drinking from the same glass, eating from the same plate, sleeping on the same bedding. Never could have imagined it. So now he writes this entire letter, which I'm not going to go into over here right now, about his experiences. And you should read the letter. It's available online. If you want it, I can send you a copy as well, etc. Now, after the Hajj, Malcom continues to travel the Muslim world. And it's funny what happens now is Malcom begins to see how duped he was by the Nation of Islam. He begins to speak to them about Islam. And he's quickly realizing, that this is not the Islam that he was taught. He asked them, do you know about Yaqub? Yaqub meaning the mad scientist who took, 99,999 blacks and took the lightest from them to a secluded place, and then he mated them until they produced a lighter from a lighter color, then lighter color, then lighter color, until eventually he made whites. That's not any Orthodox belief. Or he mentioned about the mothership at the end of time. They believe that the mothership will land and take away the blacks, and the earth will sort of become like a hell. And they're like, what are you talking about? And then when he obviously mentions Elijah Muhammad, they're like, this is not Islam. And you have to imagine the embarrassment. I remember I was teaching in English class recently, last year. And I remember I reached a point where I was teaching, and one of the students brought up a rule, and I was like, I never heard that rule before. And so I looked it up. I'm like, man, that's a rule that, as an English teacher who's been teaching for a long time, I didn't know this rule. It was a bit embarrassing. It is a bit embarrassing. Malcom, this is what he becomes known for, his Islamic preaching. Only to come and find out what he's been preaching is wrong, and the 5-year-old kid walking the streets of Mecca knew more than this 30-something-year-old man, 37-year-old man, 38-year-old man. But he took it with so much humility, and Malcom always had that humility. For him, it's like, well, that's what I was supposed to do. That's what I had to do to sort of become exposed to Islam. And he was willing to take that hit, even though it was really embarrassing for him. And so he writes. He writes about the experiences that he had. He goes to Lagos, to Nigeria, to Ghana. He's meeting all these different leaders. He's forming connections, and what that's doing is it's forming a new understanding for him. When I was in Turkey last week, a lot of the people, so we went, my wife had a training for work, but there were scholars in that group. So I was speaking to some of the scholars, and they said, oh, during our rest time today, we're going to meet such and such scholar and such and such scholar. We're going to go here, meet such and scholar. We're going to go meet Sheikh Mujir al-Khatib. We're going to go meet, we're trying to meet Sheikh Mufti Abu Lubaba, and he's not here, but Mufti Ahmad Raza, his student, is here. And we're going to go here. And they were just talking about this. But when in reference to Malcolm X, it made sense. Because I was thinking, why do they have to go meet scholars? Because they're scholars themselves. But you always want to meet people of wisdom. And this is another lesson, especially for us young guys, right? And I consider myself young because I'm only 40. 40, Islamically, you're barely reaching, you just left youth. You're now becoming an adult. If you look at the initial Arab system in which the Prophet grew up in, 40 was still young. When Umar radiallahu anhu, who became Muslim, he was considered like a boy. He was 28 years old. He was very, very young. In their eyes, that was nothing. Because now that I've reached 40, I realize how little I know. When I was in my 20s, I thought how much I know. Now I realize how little I know. And as you age, you'll see that. So you go and you sit with elders because they'll give you nuggets. They'll give you small gems of wisdom, or you'll learn from their disposition or the way they carry themselves, just things about life. And so what Malcolm did was he was just someone, despite his age, was seeking and searching, and he began to learn until all of a sudden he thought, he began to formulate his new plan. So thus, when he returns back to America, and he begins to, he now addresses the audience now as Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, and he began to speak. Everyone rushed to him to see what is this person from the Nation of Islam who thinks we're devils, they began to see what does this guy have to say. And all of a sudden, he's not speaking about violence. And he's not speaking about white men being the devil. He's speaking about working with anyone who wants to make society a better place. And it's unfortunate that even Muslims today, we say, oh, well, that person's Barelwi, or that person's Tablighi, or that person's Deobandi, or that person's Wahhabi, or that person's Sufi, or Salafi, or Ikhwani. And we make all these are fake barriers. That person says La ilaha illallah, just as we say La ilaha illallah. That person puts their head down when doing sajda, just as we do, but people can't look past it. And when Malcolm, he mentioned some things. There's a line over here. Where is it? So he says, yes, I wrote a letter from Mecca. You're asking me, didn't you say that now you accept white men as brothers? Well, my answer is that in the Muslim world, I saw, I felt, and I wrote home how my thinking has broadened. Just as I wrote, I shared true brotherly love with many white-complexioned Muslims who never gave a single thought to the race or to the complexion of another Muslim. I'm going to skip ahead. He said, yes. In the past, I have made sweeping indictments of all white people. I never will be guilty of that again. As I now know that there are some white people who are truly sincere, that some truly are capable of being brotherly toward a black man. Remember that when that young college woman came to him? I don't know if you guys remember this. And she came and said, "What, I'm not like my ancestors. What can I do to help with the problem?" What did he say? Who remembers? Remember? Said nothing, and he walked away. Basically, you're white, you can't help. And he said that's one of his biggest regrets. If you could find her somehow in life and tell her. And Spike Lee, when he made the movie Malcolm X, he actually made a scene where another white woman sort of comes later and asks the same thing. The first time, same response, but the second one didn't occur in real life. How Malcolm then gave her advice, sort of like a post-mortem, tribute to how he had changed. All of that never really happened. And Malcolm now he says that, yes, I have been convinced that some American whites do want to help cure the rampant racism, which is on the path to destroying this country. And he constantly brings it back to Islam. And this is where you see Malcolm in his short time, talking about 1 year, as being an Orthodox Sunni Muslim, became a reviver of Islam. Because everything he did for blacks, for justice and equality in America, for everything that he did was always coming back to how Islam made it. So people began to see it's Islam that's the solution. And it really, people always talk about Malcolm, he's us. Well, Malcolm is not, for the majority of his life, anything resembling a Muslim. Well, he is in his discipline, but not really in terms of his worship or belief. But that last little phase, and that's a hadith of the Prophet that mentions that there's a person who's on the path of the people of hell. And he's only a handspan away from hell, and then all of a sudden what happens, what's written overtakes him and he becomes a person of paradise. Malcolm's a classic example. He's at the end of his life. I mean, he doesn't know it. He's going to be assassinated soon. He's at the end of his life. And what does Allah Ta'ala do? What's written overcomes him, and he becomes what? A person who's now spreading Islam in such a way that has been, it's unrivaled in many ways, because every platform he had, he showed his love for the deen through there. So now we've reached the last portion. So this is where we're going to end next week. Next week's the conclusion of the Autobiography of Malcolm X. We're going to take a short break. It'll be 1, maybe 2 weeks. Why? We have to figure out new timing, because the Sunday school is going to start. And with the new timing, I have to figure out too with my schedule as well. In the meantime, the next book we're going to cover is called Habib Time. Habib Time is the autobiography of Habib Nurmagomedov, who's still alive. That will be the next book we cover. But again, next week we're doing the epilogue, the last chapter. Then you have a chance to get Habib Time. It's available, I think, online for free. I got it for free online through Amazon. Or you can purchase it. But unlike this book, the next one I'm going to ask you guys to read the chapters in advance. Because I feel like I'm coming, no one knows what I'm talking about. So next time you have to read it in advance, inshallah, and then we'll go from there. Any announcements? Okay, yeah. So next week we're not going to have any athletics before, because Sunday school has, what's it called? Registration next week. So there'll be quite a few cars in the parking lot. And there'll be people here inside as well. So we'll just go straight to the lecture. The lecture will start slightly earlier. Instead of 12:35, 12:40, so start at 12:30. People are on like a list, right, where you contact them? I'm going to when I'm reviewing for the chapter next week, I'm going to let you know if I want to start just a little earlier, maybe like 12:15, 12:20. I'll let you know that. I just want to revise the last 2 chapters, or last chapter and a half, and see how much time I'll need for it. And then we'll get a short break while we figure out, inshallah, what's the next steps. In the meantime, go ahead and access your copy of Habib Time. Wa akhiru da'wan, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Okay, so I'm going to go as I always do and get my kids prepared.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله